Hey everyone, lately I've been playing a lot of Bloodborne on Twitch to celebrate my new status as affiliate. This milestone means a lot to me, and once again I'd like to thank all of my followers, subscribers, viewers, and even lurkers for all of your support over the many months. The reason I chose to play Bloodborne and start at my millionth playthrough of the game is because this is actually amongst my top 3 favorite games of all time, coming in at second place next to Final Fantasy VII and Death Stranding. On my first stream of the game, a viewer asked me a great question, which was, why is Bloodborne one of your favorite games? To sum it up, I told them that it's because of a number of things, including the lore, world building, combat, but most importantly, because of how much it moved me and helped me to grow as a person. I realized that there's no short way for me to express my love for this game, so I thought I'd make a video talking about why I love this game so much. Now, as I mentioned before, Bloodborne is a game that helped me to grow as a person. In fact, all 3 games in my top 3 of all time have done so. I actually made a video on Death Stranding talking about that game's impact on me, and now it's Bloodborne's turn. To understand how not only Bloodborne but really any game that I classify as being one of my all-time favorites has affected me on a personal level, it's important to know a little bit more about me. I am a person with a pretty rough case of social anxiety. I've always been afraid of taking risks, trying new things, and meeting new people. Back in 2015, I was still in high school. I was afraid of almost everything, specifically socializing with people and making friends. I also never took risks nor went out of my comfort zone to try new things. I'd always attend school and come home the second it was over. Then, in March, Bloodborne was released. Now at that point, I'd only ever played one game by From Software before, and that was Dark Souls 2. I really enjoyed Dark Souls 2, and having seen all of the promotional material for Bloodborne after my playthrough of that game, I couldn't be more excited to play it, and I remember getting it the day that it released. And my experience playing Bloodborne from start to finish left me with a lot to think about with regards to my fears and anxiety. And in the end, I can happily say that it helped me to overcome them in many ways. Why? Because Bloodborne is a game about ending nightmares. One word that I would use to describe this game is meta. At least to me. Bloodborne is a very meta game in the sense that not only is the narrative and gameplay about destroying the nightmare plaguing the city of Yharnam once and for all, but so is the player's experience. And let me explain what I mean by that. Bloodborne at every turn presents you with terrifying Lovecraftian abominations and grotesque creatures that are spawns of the corrupted blood and the nightmare itself. And these foes are by no means easy to defeat, since Bloodborne in typical From Software fashion is a hard game. You will stumble, you will fall, and you will die multiple times on your journey through this game. But through perseverance and courage, you will inevitably destroy the nightmare and witness the Yharnam sunrise once more. And anyone can do it. Anyone, through tenacity and grit, can conquer this game and in doing so conquer fear itself. That was my experience with Bloodborne. I realized that if my player hunter was able to survive and vanquish the evils of this twisted Lovecraftian world where all the odds were stacked against him, then so could I with all the fears I was experiencing in my life. I knew that it wasn't going to be easy just like the game itself, but I knew that it was going to be possible and that I too would see my own Yharnam sunrise one day. The fact that this game helped me on such a personal level is the main reason for why I love it so much and why it is so important to me. But there's just so much more for me to say about why this game is the masterpiece that it is, and it's likely that I won't be able to cover everything that I want to in this video. But I'll start by saying that there is something so hauntingly alluring about this game. It does an impeccable job of pulling you into a gothic hell, where every being is possessed by an undying bloodlust, including your own player hunter, hell-bent on annihilating these plague-ridden beasts. And as you progress deeper and deeper into the ruined city of Yharnam, slaying each foe you come across, you become consumed with an unending bloodlust yourself. And I attribute this to the masterful design and implementation of the game's combat systems. The action in Bloodborne is incredibly fast-paced, stirring you up into a frenzy where each and every blow you deal to your enemies feels brutal and visceral, with your enemies recoiling to every hit with blood spurting forth everywhere. And the degree to which you can approach these encounters makes for so much replayability, given the astonishing variety in builds and playstyles with the game's unique trick weapons, which are incredibly fun to use. Ultimately, Bloodborne becomes more than just a game about hunting werewolves and crazed humans within a gothic horror story. Towards its climax and beyond, signs of something far more sinister and a transcendental race you could have never imagined come into play. and this is where the Lovecraftian elements of the game truly shine. It's difficult for newcomers to understand where Miyazaki and From Software took inspiration for the terrifying and seemingly alien race that are the Great Ones in Bloodborne. And many upon their first playthrough will not understand their purpose, their mythos, and why they threaten everything within this crumbling world. Some, understandably, may not even understand a single thing that happened throughout the entire game, much like any other Souls title. And that's okay, because few will realize upon their first run of the game that Bloodborne is heavily inspired by the works of early 20th century author H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft is easily one of the greatest horror fiction writers of all time. His work is built upon the fear of the unknown, in which great beings or monstrosities exist within our world, yet thrive on a plane of thinking and knowledge higher than our own, and any poor soul unfortunate enough to cross their path will delve into insanity. This is all entailed within Lovecraft's magnum opus, The Call of Cthulhu, featuring a titular monstrosity who you may or may not be familiar with. Bloodborne is a perfect encapsulation of Lovecraft's work, and the reason for that is simple. It features a race of Great Ones that are as terrifying as the ones you'd imagine in Lovecraft's stories, and they are all introduced to the player insidiously. The transition of the player going from the confidence that all that Bloodborne is about is hunting mere werewolves to the fear of unnatural entities existing within this world that might be out to get them is an incredibly faithful reflection of the fear of the unknown you feel reading Lovecraft's work. And the build-up to seeing them and eventually fighting them is handled masterfully through the game's mechanics. There's a stat in Bloodborne called Insight, which at first seems to be an ordinary currency used for cooperation in buying certain items. But soon, it becomes clear that insight is actually the knowledge of these Great Ones themselves, and that the more of it you amass, the more of them you see, starting with the terrifying sight of Amygdala clinging to the side of the cathedral ward. It's not that the Great Ones showed up for the player, it's that they were always there, watching your every move with this looming and haunting curiosity, much like the Great Old Ones in Lovecraft's mythos. It wasn't until 2 years after the game came out in 2017 that I was introduced to H.P. Lovecraft at an art exhibition for all of director Guillermo del Toro's major inspirations. And when I did, I read through a book of all of his short stories. And when I finally came across Call of Cthulhu, it was then that I made the epiphanic connection between what I was reading and that one gothic horror game that I had played 2 years prior back in 2015, Bloodborne itself. As soon as I made that connection, I started up a second playthrough of the game with a newfound perspective. And here's what I realized. There is a good reason for a shockingly low amount of media surrounding Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, despite each of his stories being relatively easy to tell, and various depictions of his beasts having already been made. And that last bit there is the main reason why: the depictions. Cthulhu and its brethren are written to be so unimaginable and terrifying that gazing upon them would drive the viewer insane. And when the point of a monster is to instill fear through imagining it as opposed to observing it, putting that monster on screen is a near impossibility. The reason why Bloodborne gets away with it yet still cements itself as one of the very few pieces of media to faithfully capture the essence of Lovecraft is because, ironically, it creates its own mythos. The Great Ones in Bloodborne are effective because they have their own set of rules for instilling fear, yet they still borrow a lot of inspiration from the Cthulhu mythos nonetheless. To sum it up simply, they are equally as imposing but instill fear and insanity through knowledge as opposed to sheer presence. From Software's ability to create an engaging video game that is almost a conglomeration of every single one of Lovecraft's works is commendable, and makes me appreciate it so much more. Supplementing all of this is an astonishing attention to detail. You can tell that so much love, care, and effort was put into Bloodborne in every way possible by From Software. The soundtrack is masterful, and I get chills each and every time listening to the pieces accompanying each boss fight, especially those of Father Gascoigne and Ludwig, who in my opinion are the two greatest bosses in any Soulsborne title. For the first time, I found myself actually caring about bosses in a video game from a lore standpoint. The build-up to your fight with both of these characters through environmental storytelling adds this extra layer of immersion to the fights that I had never experienced before in any of the other Souls titles. I cared about these bosses as characters, and found myself all the more invested in the fights as a result. And in the context of the characters and the lore and the storytelling, Bloodborne is easily From Software's finest work thus far, in my opinion. It takes the mysterious approach to storytelling that the previous Souls titles had established, where the narrative of these games is devoid of exposition and the player has to piece together the story through vague tidbits of dialogue from characters and item descriptions, and applies it here to this horrifying gothic setting that is crumbling around you. The sense of urgency created in this burning world, where you get to witness eldritch abominations and people in the process of losing their sanity, makes you eager to delve deeper and deeper into the nightmare and learn more about this world. The mystery created by From Software's approach to storytelling, combined with the fear of the unknown within this world, makes that even more exciting. And it really helps that this world is written and realized in an exemplary way, given the remarkable world building of a Victorian-esque Gothic setting. The game, despite being haunting, is beautiful to look at, and even though some textures may look dated, the visual direction and aesthetic of the game carry it through time, making this experience a timeless classic. I can go on and on about why I love this game. There's just so much I haven't touched on, like the DLC, The Old Hunters, which is easily the greatest expansion to a game that I've ever played. Or the Chalice Dungeons, an incredibly sophisticated network of procedurally generated side locations with a storyline of their own, offering players a wealth of gameplay and hours of fun. But what I'll leave you with for now is this. Bloodborne really is the special game that everyone has made it out to be. Regardless of who you are, what games you like, or how difficult this game may be, I strongly encourage you to play it at least once in your lifetime, because chances are it will have something in store for you. That could be the themes, the lore, the combat, the setting, the Lovecraftian influence, or something else entirely that I have not touched on. And that's because Bloodborne is, simply put, a masterpiece. I love this game, and I always will. Until the next video, keep on keeping on.